one.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jacque Burandt. I'm here in cozy San Antonio, Texas, where it's in the 40-somethings. I hope you're all safe and warm and having a great conference. I'm so excited to be with you today and have 5 experts joining me. We had a little bit of technical difficulty there, so we're so happy that we've conquered that, and we want to give a big thank you right off the bat. If everyone could give a high five or a thumbs up to the amazing people who are working behind the scenes to make all this magic happen. Yes, thank you so much. So we're so indebted. I am president of Award-Winning Results, and my work involves shining the spotlight and showcasing individuals and organizations that do amazing work. And so in that work, I have been with dozens of organizations with exceptional learning cultures. I've helped them, and they've taught me what the steps are to become an excellent learning culture. I want to share that with you today via these 5 Houston area experts. This work was captured by ATD Press a year ago in a TD at Work called Create an Exceptional Learning Culture. I think we have a link to that somewhere. I was hoping we'd be able to post that definitely at some point. In case you're interested in checking that out, you can get a lot of tips, some great case studies that are different from the ones we're going to talk about today. So I'm thrilled to have these folks with us today. It's my pleasure to be here and give this a Houston focus and to talk about some of the standout development practices. And folks, there's a link right there if anyone is interested in checking out this work that has been published by TD Press, Create an Exceptional Learning Culture. So it's my pleasure and my honor to be facilitating today's panel of standout talent development professionals from Houston. They're going to give us the inside story and some insight into how they have created an exceptional learning culture at their respective organizations. So you're in for a treat. You've heard of buy one, get one. You're going to get 5. You're going to get the secrets of special sauce success. It's how 5 different organizations have been able to master this strategy and have an exceptional learning culture. So let's get right to introducing them. Their resumes are quite extensive, and I won't be able to do justice to how wonderful they are in everything. So I'm going to give you some highlights, and then I'm going to ask you to check them out on your own, because you're going to be very impressed with the depth and the breadth and the diversity of what they have done. And you should connect with them. That's what this symposium is all about. This is what ATD is all about, is making that important connection. So please, please don't let my introduction do justice to how amazing they are. I want you to go check them out for yourself. So let's start with Dr. Larry Perkins. Dr. Larry, as we'll call him for today, is the Associate VP for HR, Talent, and Diversity at UT MD Anderson Cancer Center. And I should say the renowned MD Anderson Cancer Center around the world. He brings 40 years of experience in leadership development, training, and diversity. He's been a colonel in the Army. He's been with a New York City law firm. He came to Houston with Dynegy. He worked at Memorial Hermann before joining MD Anderson. So Dr. Larry, we're very excited to have you with us today to talk to us about developing a roadmap. Our second speaker is Arturo Valencia. He's a quality value creator, a business mentor with SCORE there in Houston, helping small businesses give back to get started in your community. He is originally from Mexico City. I was just there last year for Dia de los Muertos. It was fabulous. And he has graduated summa cum laude from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, fondly known as UNAM here. And he holds an MBA from La Universidad de las Americas, and he has an executive leadership certification from the Yale School of Management. He has been successful in leading global, industrial, multi-country, multicultural teams across the globe. So Arturo, we're delighted to have you talk to us today about aligning with strategic partnerships. Next, we have Joanna Lacey, who's SVP and Director of Learning Development at Allegiance Bank. Joanna is originally from Scotland. I was there at Thanksgiving. I miss traveling so much. So it's great to see you. And she has citizenship in both countries now, but she loves Houston for its diversity. So that's good to know. Her purpose is to help people unleash their potential, and this is a small feat, to make the world a better place. So that's a great goal. Throughout her work in various industries, she loves to see the power that individuals experience when they unleash their potential. She's worked in revenue generating positions as well as revenue supporting positions, and that gives her a unique opportunity to share her real life experience to support the needs of her business partners. She loves the opportunity to create, to build, keep learning, unlearning, and relearning. So please welcome Joanna Lacey. Thank you so much, Joanna. Dr. Megan Sutton, our second doctorate, is Director of Leadership and Learning at Houston Methodist, where she leads the team of instructional designers and facilitators that support the system's 25,000 employees. It's a daunting task. Dr. Sutton has more than 20 years experience in OD and learning roles, 14 of that in large academic medical centers. Her experience includes the gamut: OD assessment, instructional design and facilitation, performance management, competency models, coaching, succession planning, employee engagement, change management, and leadership development. So welcome, Dr. Megan. We're so happy to have you on the panel. And next we have Rhonda Reeves. Rhonda is the head of corporate learning and development at National Oilwell Varco, NOV for short. She has a very intriguing set of master's degrees. I was fascinated by this combination: a Master of Education from Purdue and an MFA from Rutgers. So we'll have to hear more about that someday. She's worked in learning for 20 years, is a distinguished Toastmaster, and she's an author of The Performance Management Makeover, available on BookBoon. She's a founding member of Red M, a pro bono marketing group that helps nonprofits focused on the recovery of women who are sex trafficking survivors. So that is our panel. We are so delighted to have all 5 of them. And I'd also like to give a brief shout out to 2 other people who happen to be behind the scenes today. One is Rachel Harner. I met her earlier this year when she was with Inside Out Development. She came to San Antonio to see a panel that I conducted with the amazing organizations in San Antonio, very similar to this, except it was pre-pandemic. It was in January, and so it was live. And it was her idea to take the show on the road. At that time, it was a real road to Houston. And so she began connecting me to the Houston chapter. So I want to thank Rachel a lot. And then also Harriet Pritchett, who's been working behind the scenes. She worked with us regularly on selecting these amazing speakers. She helped us iron out all the details. Were we going virtual? Were we going to be live? What were we doing? And so Harriet, I want to thank you for being the glue that held this all together up until the very few minutes ago today. Thank you, Harriet. That's enough about us. Let's talk about you, the audience out there who've come to this virtual summit. And I'd like to pull up the first poll and do a quick pulse check. We're going to find out from you what you think about your organization's learning culture. And there we go, right on cue. Thank you. So please rate the learning culture at your organization from exceptional to severely lacking. Like to see what you all think about your learning culture. exceptional, very good, average, below average, or severely lacking. All right, let's close the poll. Can we see the results? Interesting. Wow, a huge percentage, 84%, either very good or average. Very interesting. We'll have to see about why a few exceptionals and about the same number of severely lacking as exceptional. So I guess we're pretty true to the general bell curve there. Okay, well, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and close that out. And let's talk to our panelists now. You've heard me talk about them. Let's hear directly from them. So just very quickly, we're going to ask each one of the panelists, going in the order, what is the one thing that they would say is exceptional about their current organization? What is the one significant salient factor that makes you stand out as exceptional? So let's start with Larry, Dr. Larry.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity, Jackie, to talk to the group. I would say for us at University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center that the one thing I could say that makes us stand apart and makes us an exceptional learning culture is the vision, the inspired vision that our president has set, and the commitment from our executive leadership team to model the way. So we have a strong vision, a strong commitment. We're an academic medical center. We have a bunch of folks who are committed to lifelong learning. And through that inspired vision, our executive leader team is modeling the way. They are the first ones in class and the last ones to leave.
So their presence is felt demonstrably. They're there.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We're going to hear more about your culture next. Let's go on to Arturo. Arturo, what would you say is the salient characteristic of an exceptional learning culture?
Well, I would say that it is definitely once we have defined clearly the vision and where we want to be, what is really making, and I've worked to make all my organization this way, is that very heightened sense of awareness of the things that we don't know, which is extremely important. I mean, we don't know what we don't know. In other words, we understand our own limitations. And that is extremely important because as we understand where we want to be, we don't necessarily have all the tools and all the knowledge and competencies and capabilities all the time. So understanding what we're lacking to get where we want to be is actually something that has always helped us to push forward and then engage those subject matter experts to help the organization to learn and to grow so we can achieve our long-term and short-term goals.
Great. So you're saying that it's knowing those gaps and then reaching out to fill those with strategic partners. And we're going to hear more about that from you in just a minute too. All right. And next, Joanna, tell us about what your idea is of an exceptional learning culture at your organization.
One of the things that struck me as soon as I joined Allegiance Bank was that it's the openness and the willingness of the executive team to support and engage in the learning opportunities and also walking the talk and modeling the self-development. And that was just, it's like a breath of fresh air. So I absolutely loved that connection with what Larry had shared as well.
Okay, so that you're having them visibly there and then walking the talk and modeling those behaviors that they want to see. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. All right, Dr. Megan.
Hello. One of the things that that our organization really focuses on is the applied part of learning, practicing and doing and being able to learn by having stretch assignments or projects, and then aligning those to where we're going as an organization and the skills we need to develop for the future as well. So almost every training program that we offer has an applied component to that. So really focused on stretching people in a way where they can practice on the job, in projects, in roles, and use those skills to make sure that we're solidifying that learning that they have.
So a lot of experiential action learning, and I hear the emphasis on application. And so that's great because we're going to ask you to talk about how you know if you've been successful by applying the learning. Thank you so much. And Rhonda, how about you?
I think what makes us exceptional is our ability to look ahead and purposefully innovate. Purposeful innovation is one of our values actually at NOV. So we carry that through learning, and it's allowed us to really thrive in adverse conditions, which we have definitely experienced in oil and gas over the past few years. I know Steve Jobs said that the number one thing that made him successful was adversity. So we've innovated kind of around that idea. We're not stuck to traditional learning practices. We've been able to leverage others and partner and think differently about how we're delivering and communicating learning so that it's not just in our L&D boundaries anymore. It's been fun.
Okay. And we're going to get to hear more about that and how you've celebrated and shared your success. So thanks to each of you for just that little snippet of what's to come. I want to go over very briefly the format so the audience will be able to participate and know what we're going to do today. So each panelist is going to be speaking for about 7 minutes. That's all we have, unfortunately, in order to allow time for questions and answers from you at the end. And they're going to talk about one of the particular 5 steps that I found in my research were essential to achieving this exceptional culture. So you're going to get to hear from each one of them about how that particular step made it happen at their organization. And then at the end of the 5 presentations, we're going to ask them very quickly just to give you one piece of advice, free advice today, no extra charge from where they've been. And then we'll open it up to questions and answers. So be sure to put questions in the chat box and we will take those at the end and we will try to figure out which ones are for whom or if they're open to everyone. So let's get started. We're ready to talk about our 5 steps. The first step is develop a roadmap. And we're going to talk to Larry. So Larry, we know there's a difference between a compass and a map. A compass can be pointing to excellence, but it won't get us there without a roadmap. So I'm very interested to hear, and I'm sure everyone out there is too, what is the roadmap that you used at MD Anderson? Can you lead us through that? Here's Larry. There you are.
Okay, so thanks for unmuting me. I would say the roadmap is probably one of the most crucial steps in the journey because, you know, being a former military guy, I know that if you don't have a destination and a map to get to the destination, you're going to come to the fork in the road and probably choose the wrong path. And so my experiences, I want to acknowledge that I probably learned a lot about creating a roadmap from several people that are on this forum. One of them is my good friend Carol, who I worked with at Herman, and another one's Megan, who I worked with previously in her role as an OD person. And a lot of the things that I learned from both of them were how we create a good roadmap. And at MD Anderson, the story I want to share with you is how we created our Leadership Institute. And that journey started many years ago. And it started, you need a burning platform sometimes to help you establish a shared vision. And our burning platform was feedback from our employees from our engagement survey we referred to as the Big Survey. And we had several questions around development and several questions around leadership. And we were consistently getting feedback from our employees that leadership had gaps. And we started a leader development program as a result of that, but that wasn't moving the needle quickly enough. And when I talked about having leadership commitment, we had a presidential change and in came this guy named Peter Pisters. And in his first speech to the institution, he said, the most important thing we could do is take care of our people. Without taking care of our people, we can't take care of our patients. And we're going to do that by developing leaders differently going forward than we've done to the past. So that vision in his first speech started to set the tone, because we were already doing leader development, but we weren't doing it at the level that was sustainable. We weren't doing it at the level where the commitment was there. It was mostly volunteers, and you would teach a class and you would see the same leaders in there, but the ones who really needed to be there weren't attending. But once that vision was set that we were going to invest differently in leader development, that roadmap that we were going to create included forming a leadership institute. We began to have a roadmap that says this is important. And that roadmap started in December of 2016, where we formed an exploratory committee, what we referred to as our Leader Development Council. And it being an academic medical center, you have to have key stakeholders at the table. So that for us included faculty, trainees, because we have a school of students. And then in the course included administrative and classified leaders. That the council started to talk about how we're going to inspire Peter's vision. And over a year and a half, we came up with a new model. And I love what Megan said earlier about application, because one of the things that was missing in our roadmap was people would come to class and then go out of class, but really didn't apply it in a meaningful way, because the feedback was telling us that we would teach coaching skills, but they weren't coaching their employees. So we put in a model called Learn, Practice, and Apply. And based on previous experience of application, we put a lot more experiential and simulation into our model. And we have a lot more requirements where people are, it's built into every training. And the other thing we built into our roadmap was diversity is fundamental to everything that we're doing, diversity and inclusion. And so in every leadership class form, there is an element of diversity and inclusion that is weaved into the curriculum. So, because we didn't want that to be a standalone opportunity, because what we do every day in all of our workplaces has inclusion applications. And so when you think about apply, how do we apply that in the situation where we have these diverse working teams? So we wanted to infuse that in our roadmap. And we fast forward to 2018 and we launched our Leadership Institute. We launched it around Learn, Practice, Apply. We launched it based on a partnership we have with the American Association of Physician Leaders. We were the first group to be certified to use their training curriculum for faculty, because one of the key stakeholders, of course, in an academic medical center is faculty. So as part of that roadmap, we wanted to add some value by having that group certify that we were able to train faculty. And in that partnership, it gave us credibility. It gave us credibility that we didn't always have with faculty. And that was important. That was an important step for us. So when we launched, our vision was in our roadmap, of course, we're all about making cancer history, but we wanted to develop leaders. LEAD was our keyword, lead. And in that lead, we wanted learners who were relentlessly committed to learning. And so our acronym for LEAD now is learners who are emotionally intelligent, accountable, and developing and serving others. That was our acronym for LEAD. And you've seen many acronyms for the word LEAD around the healthcare space, at least. But that was the way we did it, because in his very first speech, Peter said, every leader needs to be emotionally intelligent. And that was part of our roadmap. That was part of our Inspiring a Shared Vision. So we had to go about creating assessment tools in our selection process that supported the learning from day one in the institution. And we built assessment tools, and we bought some assessment tools on emotional intelligence off the shelf from the experts at the Emotional Intelligence Consortium. And we began to build our selection process for leaders around emotional intelligence and coachability. And then we now have weaved that into our performance management process. So now all leaders, including faculty, are now measured on emotional intelligence, coachability, accountability, drive. These are words that Peter has repeatedly used, and now we have baked that into our performance management. And the last part I want to share is we have never done talent review and succession planning, and it is brutally hard in academic medical centers. And this year was our first year of doing a talent review and succession planning. And the first group we did it on was the president and his direct reports doing it on their direct reports. And it was a game changer. It was a game changer. So our roadmap started with this big survey feedback, and it's now in our journey. We're still on our journey, but we now, in our first 2 years of existence, have been recognized for this effort, once by the ATD last year with the Pinnacle Award. And then most recently this year, we've been acknowledged for our leadership journey by the American Association of Healthcare Leadership, and we were provided the Bold Award for 2020. So if there is a measure that says we're on the right track with our roadmap, I think in 2 years of the Institute, winning 2 awards from 2 global institutes and 2 development experts like ATD and the Healthcare Consortium, it's rewarding for us to say we're on the right roadmap.
And I did have one follow-up question to that. When you said, Larry, that it was a game changer, could you say just a little bit more about how and what happened?
Yeah, leaders have conversations in the hallways, and they, what happened with the talent review and succession planning process, and I learned this when I worked at Memorial Hermann with Carol, was that what happens is the apply part afterwards wasn't very good. And so what I've learned from those experiences is, instead of having those hallway conversations, we put them out in front and center in front of everybody. The transparency that comes with a talent review calibration process, and then the building of the succession plan after that, it was the transparency that was the game changer.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I heard so many things coming out of that roadmap, and part of it was the signs, I think, that you would say that you would have on a destination. And I love the commitment, the relentlessly committed to learning. Is that right? Was that the mantra? Relentlessly. Yeah. That reminds me of Rackspace here in San Antonio, and they have their fanatical customer service, which is a sort of similar mantra that drives them. All right. Well, that's a one. Go ahead.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Transparency, accountability, emotional intelligence, and using assessments, performance management, succession planning, all of that, and boiling that into the roadmap. There can be a lot of different roadmaps that people choose. I know clients that I worked with here in San Antonio, Alamo Colleges, use the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Criteria. So one roadmap is not necessarily going to work for every organization. And I think what's amazing about what you all did at MD Anderson was that you looked at where the gap was, as Arturo said, and it was that you weren't making it. And then you had new leadership, which can always be a catalyst for change, and good or bad. In this case, I think it was good. And then you used assessments, and you really plotted out your map. It had to have a diversity infused in every piece of it. So that seems to be the right roadmap for you at MD Anderson. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I would like each of you to think about, when you go back to your organization, do you already have a roadmap, or is it time to get one started? And if so, what would that look like? So that's a sort of a food for thought. Okay, let's move on to our step number 2 of the 5 essential steps. And we know now that we need a roadmap, and we have one good example of how to get there. But the truth is that we really can't go it alone. We really shouldn't go alone. We wouldn't want to go it alone. We're going to need some partners. So we can look internally for great strategic partners. We can look externally. We can do both. And Arturo has a success story with his history and experience in which he was able to find strategic partners for his journey to excellence. So I'd like Arturo, if you take it over there and take it over now and talk to us about the aligning with strategic partners, step number 2.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Jackie. And Larry, thanks for opening the conversation as far as the relevance of having that roadmap that helps us to understand where we want to be and how we can get there, which is extremely important, because once we have that roadmap, then we can start identifying the gaps on the competencies and capabilities that the organization has, with those that are required to move us forward and to help us to accomplish and to attain those objectives that we have established. And the fact is, nowadays we are living in a highly competitive, ever-changing business landscape. Everything is changing way faster than what has happened in the past. We have a rising complexity in the way that we do business, the way that the world interacts in the different industries and different countries. We have the digital revolution on top of us that has been sped up because of all these pandemic. Then we have all these crises that are happening in the world that is helping us to rethink and redefine the way that we do business. And on top of everything that, of all of that, we have a multi-generational workforce that is actually shifting and changing the way that we do business and the way that we deliver to our customers and internally in our organizations. So when we look at all of these different changes happening today, what we can really see and immediately see is that the knowledge that we have today might not be the knowledge, and it's not the knowledge that we need to succeed in the future. So it has a shorter than ever shelf life than what it has been in the past, because of all these different changes that are happening so fast. So you heard me at the beginning when I said that one of the secrets that I've had in creating a learning organization is to make sure that all my organization understands that we don't know what we don't know. Therefore, it is extremely important that as we identify the gaps on the knowledge, competencies, capabilities that the organization has to move forward, then we need to make sure that we understand how we can fill these gaps. And the fact is, as organizations, we make continuously the same mistake. We turn individual contributors into leaders or managers just by believing that giving them the title, that's going to come with all the competencies. We make the greatest service engineer into the worst service manager. We make the greatest salesman into the worst sales manager. We cannot believe and continue believing, especially with all these changes that we have today, that the simple title is going to make a person changing and evolving into the next role, into the next position, especially when we're moving these people into leadership roles. So we need to start engaging internally with our own organizations to understand the resources that we have internally, all the training, the development that we have internally, and then externally, because we need to recognize that the internal resources and the knowledge and competencies have a limit. And if we don't recognize that, then we can limit the development of the organization based on our own limits. And then we can just be condemning that organization to fail and eventually disappear, because we won't be able to deliver what is expected from us, from the market, from the customers, and we won't be able to be proactive at all the different changes that are happening in the market. So this engagement with partners, internal and external, are extremely important. Because those are the ones that are going to help us to fill all the gaps that we have in the organization. And when we do this internally, I don't think that I need to go too deep into what the internal the internal resources could be, because we have the OD organizations, the DNL organizations, we have the subject matter experts inside the organizations, so we can tap along those resources and start developing what we require. But as I said before, there is a limit. So when we hit that wall, as far as the limit on the knowledge and competencies, then we need to turn outside. we need to start looking into these strategic outside partners that could be in the shape of consultants, that could be in the shape of research institutions, schools, colleges, that have developed all the different tools that are required to help us moving. Now, this is extremely important because as we engage these third parties, these external advisors, these external partnerships, it is important that we also recognize the fact that there's a lot of value in the diversity. What Jackie was mentioning in one of the stories here is early in my career, as I was joining the workforce coming out of the school, I ended up applying for a job in a company, and the original response was, no, we don't hire people from that college. All the people that we are hiring is from this specific college. It was interesting. So I guess that just sheer will and just pushing, I made myself into that organization because that was the role that I wanted. I wanted to work in that specific company. When I joined that company, I realized that every certain number of months, there was a group of interns that were hiring the company. And from those interns, the best ones would just start getting into the different roles that the company was opening to fulfill all the needs. I realized that all these interns were coming from the same college, from the same bachelor degree, from the same class, from the same, even from the same building. So the diversity of thoughts, the diversity of ideas wasn't really there. Everyone was shaped in the same way. Everyone came with the same background, and everyone was looking at the very same things that we're looking from the many years behind. So as I joined that organization, came from a different college, from a different institution, from a different bachelor degree, from a different everything, I started actually helping the organization to realize that they were limiting themselves by just looking into a specific area, looking into a specific outside partner. And by doing that, then they actually started looking, taking a step back, and then looking into what other institutions, what other colleges there were available, that they could start getting more people, more and more people to help them to move faster. And incredibly enough, just a few years ago, I faced a situation very similar. Working in oil and gas in Houston, all the engineers, or the 99.9% of the engineers that the company were hiring, came either from A&M or from UT. And you can clearly see these were the two big groups of engineers that we were hiring. We had a manufacturing location in Erie, Pennsylvania, and we had developed a very strong partnership with Penn State, the engineering college from Penn State. And in Erie, we had this wonderful program in which we were bringing people from Penn State to help us into all the different areas. As soon as we started pushing to expand that partnership that we had in Erie, Pennsylvania with Penn State into other locations in Texas, we started seeing a way faster growth in the way that we were implementing technologies and changing the way that we were looking at the different segments of the industry, because these young kids came with a complete different mindset. They had a different background. They have had exposure to other industries outside oil and gas that help us to start looking into other areas. So selecting, identifying the gaps, being self-aware of those gaps and the limitations that we have to fill those gaps to help us to move towards the final objective is extremely important. But then the way that we engage with external partners also is going to dictate how fast we can change and how fast we can start creating this learning culture in the organization, because we bring diversity of thoughts, diversity of ideas into what we are doing internally.
And with your partnership with Penn State, how did you first find out about them? How did you approach them? How did you form that strategic partnership?
Well, it was out of a pure need, right? So we had the partnership at corporate level with A&M and UT, but trying to create internship or take interns from Texas to Pennsylvania, where the temperature can get a bit cold, you know. The weather is not as nice as it is in certain areas of Texas. You might argue with that, but it's cold. It was very difficult to try to move people from other locations. So what we did is look in the region and say that, well, who else do we have here that could help us to develop all those different things that we require? And that can help us not just with the interns, but also with technology programs and research needs that we have to help us to move our agenda from the technology standpoint. So we started very small, and then that grew to the point where we ended up having a few years ago a group of about 80 to 100 engineers that, while they were based in Erie, they were actually doing work globally for the corporation. They were engaged with the teams in Norway, they were engaged with the teams in Houston, they were engaged with the teams in Brazil. So we took this group of people and they became sort of the backbone of the internship programs from the technology and development standpoint. And then from there, as the interns graduated, then we started just hiring them into all the different locations that we have, into all the different engineering groups. And that was actually very successful because we started increasing the amount of people that we were bringing from different, from other universities.
So you created a pipeline.
Yes.
By doing this through the internship, you create a pipeline, and a diverse pipeline.
A diverse pipeline. And you know, that is just an example, but the other is as we engage with companies that help us to develop the training that we needed to deliver on the training programs, we went from the face-to-face to the full-blown CBTs of staying 8 hours in front of a computer to the short clips with 5 or 10 minutes that you participate every day to start moving forward. But that only comes by recognizing the fact that internally, we will never have all the resources and all the competencies that we require. We need to tap along those resources and use them the maximum amount possible, but then we need to look outside, because outside there is people that is engaging with other industries, other customers, with a wider view of the world, that sometimes the view that we have on the world, because we are embedded into our business, into what we are doing. So by going out, we actually achieve that additional exposure to the world that we might not have in the companies that we're working on.
And it's a very interesting point you make about resources and knowing the limit to when you have to say, we just don't have that internally, we have to look outside. Because I think that budgets are always tight. You always feel like maybe it's cheaper to get it done on the inside, but sometimes in the long run, it's not, because of what you've just described. All right, well, and the diversity angle is great. I love that. Knowing your gaps, looking for partners to fill those gaps. And that's really step number 2, well said, in our journey to creating an exceptional learning culture. So let's say you go back to work and you're at home at work, and you're thinking about this, and you're getting your steps together, and you know you've got to have that roadmap, and then you've got to think about, what partners am I going to need to pull this off? I'm not going to be able to do it internally, perhaps even using strategic partners. So who in my community is it? You said research institutes, consultants, education institutions, community groups, even to look around. And so that's a great part of networking and with the community. So good advice to everyone about where to look to align to a strategic partnership. So you've thought about that. You've got your roadmap. Well, you know, it comes a time you have to produce something. You can't just be in the planning stages all this time. You've got to put out some kind of program to get you started. And Joanna, you're going to talk to us about step number 3, create an anchor program. I know you're really excited about the one that you created at Allegiance Bank. And I know you had to make a pivot right in the middle of starting that. So Joanna, could you talk to us about creating an anchor program? Well, we need to unmute her.
Okay, fantastic. It's normally me that's facilitating online Zoom calls, so I don't like not having the power to unmute myself. It's an exercise in patience, I think. So as Jackie had mentioned, this time last year, we were actually designing our anchor development program, which was specifically a management development program called Managing for Performance Excellence. And this came to be because we knew that we were moving out of a traditional performance review cycle, which of course is a yearly performance review with ratings, and we wanted to move into a quarterly performance development discussion cycle. And instead of ratings, it would just be statuses on goals. So we wanted to do that as an organization because we've declared growth goal internally within the bank, and to be able to support that, we knew we would have to really go somewhere that was unfamiliar and engage in new practices and help our managers to be able to practice intentional performance development. And that meant some of the basics of goal setting, aligning on goals, offering feedback and feed forward, and coaching as well. So in moving with that initiative of moving for a performance review cycle or a performance review process into a performance development quarterly cycle, what we wanted to do is develop the managers to be able to have quality discussions. Okay, so we designed the program to offer education, but also training and practice as well, because we've talked a lot, and I've heard that from, of course, Larry, as well as Arturo and my other fellow panelists, the importance of actually doing application, right? The practice piece of it. So the program itself is designed to support in a just-in-time format the performance development cycle, so that we're giving managers the opportunity to learn some content, practice it during their performance development discussions, and then at the next session, they have the opportunity to come back and share what went well and what didn't. And for each formal live session we have, and part of the pivot, of course, is we were originally planning to do this in person, and now we're doing it virtually. So between each program, we also have inter-session coaching circles, which is optional, and any of the attendees can sign up, and now they get more additional support in practicing what they're learning in class, and it's a safe environment. And what's been great about doing that is that we're starting to see where people are getting really good at developing SMART goals and being able to understand, I need to diagnose someone. We use the situational leadership model. I can diagnose someone on their specific development level on this specific goal as well. So the Managing for Performance Excellence program has live sessions. It also has the inter-session coaching circles as well. And it does support that cadence performance development discussions on a quarterly basis. So our 4 pillars, if you will, of the program are situational leadership. So we're helping people, or have helped people, to create goals, to align on those goals, to align on their development level, and also to match the coaching or development style that employee needs. We're working on feedback and feed forward. So now you've had goals, you've set goals, you're working towards those. How are they actually going? And then we'll move into coaching and how to develop your employees for their next role or where they're going. And then lastly, creating an environment where engagement can flourish, a high-performing team environment as well. And as Jackie mentioned, as all of us have had to do, pivot has been the buzzword, one of the buzzwords for this year. So we delayed our start due to COVID-19. Of course, we are a bank. We've been incredibly busy with the PPP program. And we're still, though, we've been able to launch the program through our pivot and still support a performance development cycle, because what became very obvious when things, from a development perspective, froze for a couple of months, it became very obvious that although people were busy, they were reactive. They were busy just doing the PPP program, trying to reach out to customers, and things will have to move on. We're long gone past the stage of, I can't wait things to get back to normal. There is no normal. There's just the new. There's just a new normal. And part of that, of course, means you have to get people, and leaders and managers in particular, they have to be able to work with what's next. What does your goals look like in the future? So we can move people out of being stuck in the wishing for what was and the plan, and move them into the planning for the future as well. So we are just about to go into our next performance development cycle, which will start, of course, it will be a discussion that covers the whole of 2020, which I'm sure will be very interesting discussions. But again, we're supporting people through that and helping them understand, how do I give feedback and feed forward in these sessions as well. And that's planned into 2021. So again, we're still following that cadence of supporting the performance development initiative as well. So in terms of one of the questions that I was preparing for in today's session was, what kind of metrics do you have? And at this point, what we've set up is really the framework for the metrics. You know, since we did have to pivot, and we took a pause and we took a pivot and we started. It's early days, but what we're already starting to see is increases in efficiencies. We're already starting to see that. And because we're using that situational leadership model, if you're not familiar with it, it does give us the opportunity to diagnose employees as to their development level on a specific goal. So what we're going to do in 2021, now that we've educated the managers who have educated the employees, we're going to ask each manager employees to rate themselves on their goals, and they'll include that in our HR system. We actually use UltiPro as well, and then we'll be able to see the progression as people move from where they start at the first development level in a goal to when they become proficient. And if you're not familiar with the research on the situational leadership model, the more people that are in the later stages of the development process, that are actually contributing to the organization versus costing an organization money. So we'll be able to track through our systems how people are progressing and developing on each goal as well. Okay. I think that's all that I had to share, Jackie. I'm sure you'll have some questions for me as well.
Well, we have one from the audience that I said we'll do at the end, but I think it's appropriate to do this one now, if that's okay. It's from Jill Hickman, and she wants to know who leads the coaching cycles for the learning cohort, self-led, session facilitator, led by a past attendee.
Thank you, Jill. That question, always great questions from Jill. We're currently using one of our team members, learning and development team members, to lead the coaching circles. But what the desire is, as people get used to the format of these coaching circles, is that we will use some of our managers that are actually great coaches, and they'll start leading some of these coaching circles. So it should become self-sustaining over a period of time. But for right now, it is our learning and development consultants. That's a great question.
Great idea to make it sustainable by using those coaches, using those managers as coaches. So that's a great idea. You mentioned you're seeing increases in efficiency. Could you just say a few more words about that, Joanna?
We are. What would happen is that prior to really developing or helping managers understand the science behind creating goals and how important it is, we would see managers would often outsource their coaching. So rather than actually coach somebody themselves, they would say, hey, I need to employ an external, I see nodding heads here. I need a coach to coach this person. Well, that's getting less, as managers are realizing I can actually do this myself. So it goes back to the analogy of teaching someone to fish rather than feeding them fish over a period of time. So that's where we're starting to see that. But also, we fold under the HR organization in Allegiance Bank. We're also seeing that the contacts to HR on a reactive basis are less from our managers, because they're able to deal with things up front. They're reaching out less on a reactive basis because they're able to work with their employees more proactively and help set the proper expectations.
That's a really good metric. I think a lot of people can use that one, and that impinges on productivity and employee engagement and everything that you've talked about.
Yes.
So great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Joanna. It's interesting to see how you've pivoted And it will be interesting to see your results when you look at next year, since it's been such a crazy year for everyone. It's going to be interesting. So thank you. I have to say that in finding these first three panelists, I was led to them, fortunately, by Harriet and Rachel, and I didn't know really anyone in Houston. Now, finding the fourth panelist, the person who was going to speak about assess results, was really difficult. We asked a number of people. Many of them did not feel that they were there to present on that. And so I was fortunate enough, I'm on the ATD Award Strategy Committee, and I knew that Houston Methodist had won an Excellence in Practice Award. I was not the judge of that one, but I knew about it. And I also know from having been in healthcare for 32 years, how difficult it is for healthcare to have those kinds of metrics. So I tracked down Dr. Megan, and she graciously agreed to share with us today how they have done such a good job that they were awarded with the ATD Excellence in Practice Award for some work that they did there. So Dr. Megan, we know this is the most difficult. We know it's just not out there the way that some of these other great programs are. So what can you share with us about how to make this happen as part of our plan to create an exceptional culture?
Okay, well, with that introduction, I may have to rethink some of my comments. But I mean, working in a healthcare organization, we are extremely data-driven, data-rich. It's always the latest study or the numbers that we track everything down to the data level. But when it gets to training and learning and development, it's so much more difficult to get to a metric that everyone agrees to the meaning of what that metric means, and that the activity that you're doing with the development program is truly what's contributing to that metric. And so we had a unique opportunity to really show the impact of a development experience with a program that we created several years ago called Pathway to Unparalleled. So I'm going to kind of spend a little bit of time really talking about that program. Several years ago, we started noticing that we started having a decline in retention across our organization, overall, as well as in very key roles like nursing and some of our other critical clinical roles. Now, that's particularly concerning for us in the Houston area, and Larry can attest to this. We sit in an incredibly competitive environment. The Texas Medical Center is huge. There are a lot of hospitals and healthcare systems that sit within that. We joke a lot when we present outside the city that it's easier to change the organization you work for than your parking space in the medical center, because it is just that big. And so we needed to be able to retain our key talent. And so the fact that turnover was increasing was very concerning. And so we really started to dig into the data that we had to say, what is going on here and why is this happening? Houston Methodist as an organization, one of the key things that we believe differentiates us in the market is being an employer of choice, is the employment brand that we provide to individuals that are looking for a place to work. And so one of the areas we started to look at was, well, what's happening in that standpoint? We looked at some exit data. We started looking at other data that we had available. And what we discovered is that we were also seeing a pretty significant decline in our employee engagement results as well. We had dropped out of the top 10%, which is where we had sat for a long time. We had gone all the way down into like the 86th percentile, which doesn't sound like a bad thing, but when your brand is how well you connect employees to the culture, that's a pretty significant drop and a pretty big impact. And so we started looking even further at what else was going on. What is it that changed that led to this significant drop in engagement? And what we discovered is that essentially we had also, at the same time we started to see increasing turnover and our engagement scores were starting to decline, we had experienced enormous growth as an organization. When we looked at our organization, we had, 1 in 4, 25% had been there less than a year. That's a big change in our demographics. So we had long-term employees, and now we had all these new employees that we were coming in, and we realized we must not have been doing that great of a job at really integrating them into the culture. And so we really spent some time coming up with a roadmap that was discussed. We had a whole number of activities that and programs that were started to really help address this gap. And one of those key programs was a learning experience that we called Pathway to Unparalleled. And our president had set this vision that Houston Methodist would be unparalleled in safety, quality, service, and innovation. Those were his 4 big areas that he really wanted us to focus on. And we needed a way to really help individuals connect to that. And so we did engage a partner. We did have some consulting partners that helped us, and we developed a map, a learning map. This isn't a roadmap. It was essentially a big picture that really incorporated elements from our past and our strong history, the current things that we were doing, the values that we had, the things that were going on in our market, what made us a special place, both from a patient perspective, but also an employment perspective, and then where we were going in the future. And we had this learning map that was created, this big visual imagery. And we wanted to help people walk through that map and have conversations and share stories and reconnect personally to what made us a great organization, and commit personally to how they were going to move forward to help us become that unparalleled organization. So we knew that this was not a small investment. We at the time had a workforce of about 18,000 employees. We're now up to 25,000. And we wanted to do this in a very interactive way. We did not want to tell people what unparalleled meant. We wanted them to connect with it personally. And so we, along this learning map, we set up a program where employees would come. They would come to a 2-hour session. It was a live session in person. We rented out a ballroom at a hotel that's connected with us so that we could get folks in at a time. And they would sit at a table randomly assigned with 10 of their colleagues that they may or may not have known. And a table facilitator would then lead them through a series of guided questions and stories and discussion points over that 2-hour time period. And it culminated in each individual at the table making a commitment, writing it down, sharing it with the table, and then taking that back to their workspace as a reminder as well, that of how they committed to continue forward with our vision. So if you think about this, we did over 200 sessions in a 3-month period. There were 250 people that participated in each session at 25 tables. We had 25 table facilitators. We had roaming facilitators to help the table facilitators. We had people checking in. We had somebody standing at the front kind of acting as an MC and leading that. And we did not outsource any of those roles. So every table facilitator was one of our leaders. It was either a leader in the organization, a member of our OD or learning team, or somebody that had kind of volunteered to do that, but was in a semi-leadership type role. We wanted this session to be facilitated and led by example. So I know several other speakers have mentioned kind of that importance of the leaders guiding that. And so you can imagine the cost of this program just from the time, 200 sessions, 250 plus people per session, 2 hours per session, all in a 3-month time period. So we did not have the luxury of being able to say, we think it's going to work and just trust us. we had to be able to demonstrate that this actually made a difference in terms of engagement. And so going into this process, we had also started to identify, how can we do that? How can we show this is really making an impact? We, of course, had our participant metrics and how many people we were getting through. And we absolutely did a survey at the end of every session to gather feedback and get those reactions from individuals. But we needed a way to really tie it back to engagement itself. And so we had actually worked with the vendor that we do our engagement surveys with. And what we were able to do is provide to them, here's the people who took this, here's the people who did not participate. And then they were able to continue to maintain the anonymity that we promised to our employees, but then to feed back to us, this is actually the difference in engagement scores between those individuals. And we were not only able to see an overall increase in our engagement scores, so we had dropped down to the 86th percentile, we went back up to the 95th percentile, which is also really kind of notable given that healthcare at the time was actually declining. So we went back up in engagement when we saw that our competitors and others across the nation were actually in a decline from an overall engagement standpoint. But then we were able to show that those who had participated in the program had significantly higher engagement than those who did not. So you have to be a little careful in the learning and development space, right? When you show the metrics and you show something works, because then they turn around and they say, okay, do it again. And so our 1-year program became a 5-year program. And so all those resources I mentioned before. So we did spend some time before year 2 really looking at how we could make this more efficient and how we could modify the format. So we still had the quality of discussion, but without the facilitator requirement. And so we turned to video vignettes instead of a learning map. And we had the tables self-facilitate, where we provided the video up front and led from the front and provided questions for each table to discuss and self-facilitate. We used those reaction metrics and those surveys to get feedback on, is the format working or did the format impact that? We got extremely positive feedback from our employees. They loved the stories. Every story was a story from one of our hospitals. It was not actors, it was our people telling their story. And so when we went into that second year, we knew, again, we're going to have to show that this is still impacting engagement. And I wonder if there's a cumulative effect, or if last year's is going to wear off and we have to kind of make this an annual event. And so we were able to test both of those with that data and working with our vendor as well. So we did find that, yes, it made a difference the second year. And yes, it is a recency effect. So, which is not totally surprising if you understand engagement. A year in between without reconnecting people to that is just a little bit too long. And so we saw that those who had done the first year, but not the second, did not have the same increase in engagement as those who had done the second year as well. And so that reinforced the need to continue on this 5-year journey and to continue to provide this type of reconnection and recommitment to our culture and to our mission and to our vision as we continued to grow. And so that is kind of where we are. We did 4 years. This was going to be our 5th. Obviously, that didn't happen. And unfortunately, we really could not quite find a great way to replicate this virtually in a way that made a lot of sense. And obviously, healthcare heavily impacted right now. And so we decided that instead of bringing everybody back together for another year, which we will do next year, this year, instead, we reframed the focus to really highlight how the last 4 years prepared us to respond this year, and connected the fact that we were able to pivot quickly and to innovate new treatments, as well as new ways to keep our employees safe and our patients safe throughout this. We were able to sort of reconnect our current vision to the fact that we did all these things that led up to it, and we're going to continue on this journey. It's not finished. And so we did also, not just with engagement, but we saw our turnover go back down. So we're now in a very good range for turnover. We've stayed there despite everything that's going on. And the language has changed across the organization. And so now you hear people use the unparalleled safety, quality, service, and innovation all the time. It's in everything. When we make business cases, it's connected back to that vision. When we're asking for resources, it's connecting back to that. So it really has shown an effect in the numbers, but we're also seeing it change the language and change the way that we interact with each other in the organization. So that's kind of one example. From a metric standpoint, it was really about thinking ahead of time. What is it we're really trying to change? What is it we're really trying to impact? And then getting creative and working with our vendor to find out, can we do this? Can you help us find a way to be able to show this? And so sometimes there's a little bit of pre-planning and a little bit of creativity. You can find some ways to really show meaningful value that comes out of the work that we do. I'd love to say we do this for all of our programs. We don't. But when we're looking at some of our major kind of cornerstone programs, we're always looking for how can we either directly or indirectly tie it back to something that matters to our organization.
Thank you, Dr. Megan. I enjoyed reading your the story that you submitted the application, and you were the first time I had ever heard of doing what you did with the vendor, of asking them to anonymously compare the people who went through the program's engagement scores against those that didn't. I think that's a fabulous idea, and thank you so much for sharing all of those. Really, really great way to think about creating a culture, particularly by, as you said, planning in advance. What are you going to measure before you get done? All right, well, we know how to measure or how to approach it now. So we're going to talk to Rhonda about something that it's not that we don't necessarily know how to do it the way with metrics, but I think sometimes we're just tired and we're on to the next project. And so we don't stop and celebrate and share success. I know that's something that you've had great experience with, Rhonda. Would you tell us just a little bit about what you've done in regard to step number 5?
Okay, they let me unmute now. Great. Yes, absolutely, Jackie. I'm happy to help. So really kind of what you said was, you're going to create something and measure it and then celebrate it. Well, we were still at the stage kind of where this question starts of what's the problem and what are we trying to solve, just like Megan had just said. Just to give you a little context, our journey began really kind of in 2015 on the heels of having undergone one of the most destructive downturns in oil and gas, where we went from a 60,000 person company to a 30,000 person company, really in just a matter of a few months. So from a business perspective, we were looking at all of the retention figures, and we knew we wanted to improve engagement. That's where all the research was coming at the time in 2015. And then also as a result, increased retention. That was the business result we were trying to solve for. But the thing was, we were in a downturn and we found that we were still having voluntary turnover. So imagine that there's very few jobs out there and people were still choosing to leave us. So we started focusing on voluntary turnover and what we needed to do. And so our approach was engagement, and we did it through performance development with AD or with OD, and like increasing, more quality conversations with managers, between a manager and employees. Completely changed our performance development process. We no longer call it performance management. It's development process, like Joanna had said. And then through learning and development, we also started rethinking how we were delivering learning and development, and really kind of the design behind it. So we really started to go into blended strategies at that time in 2015, and we began to experiment for a while. And I think we found kind of a happy place, although we're always iterating based on, you know, kind of the last group that meets. So one of our other business requirements was that we had to reduce cost. So prior to the downturn, we were like most people, where we were delivering all learning initiatives in person, or we were partnering with an expensive university or some other kind of vendor that we realized at the time it just was not sustainable. We were also focusing on programs that we didn't think, like when I came in, I didn't see really the business value of the topics that we were focusing on. And so we had to really kind of make a shift. And coming from a learning design background, I started to really kind of add some science to what we were doing at NOV. So just to give you some color in terms of downturns, at the time, so not NOV, but oil and gas downturns, they're expected, they're common, we know they're going to come, but typically they're displayed in kind of a slow, smooth curve happening every 5, 10, 20 years. Well, what we've seen over the past 5 years, they're happening very frequently and fast. And so now it's more of a staccato angle curve that you can see, and it looks like a troublesome EKG. And that's kind of where we are. And that was the business problem we were trying to fix, is now that we've had all of this churn happen, what are the strides we need to make to re-engage our employees and retain the good people, the good talent that we have? So I don't know if you wanted to ask me about strategies there, or how you wanted to do that, Jackie.
Well, unfortunately, I've just found out that the session will cut off automatically at 5:30 in 7 minutes.
Okay.
So if you could just go directly to talk about what you've done with celebrating and particularly sharing with the Harvard program.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So one of the blended creations that we made was something called Making Your Case. And that includes 3 requirements that we have in learning now. It has to be relevant to a business need and to the employees. It has to have real-time application. So it's not like you say, how will you apply this in your job? No, we have it on the job. It's, you know, you're going to apply something. And then the third requirement is that it must impact the business. So this Making Your Case model is an 8-week program with mid-career leaders who come in and design a real business case for their business group. Now, it's not do the business case, they actually present it, they develop it and deliver it. Now, typically in a business, in our business groups, it can take up to 8 years to get kind of one of their wish list business projects off the ground. So this is a way for a very fast turnaround for them to validate or invalidate an idea. We always telling them that killing your baby is just as smart in a business case. We want to know what are the things that are not going to work. And so this program does that. We have a partnership with managers. They're kind of a second tier participant in all of these programs. There's peer feedback. Every single week they go through this cadence of guest speakers that are internal guest speakers. Then a little bit of content on Harvard online learning, Harvard Managed Mentor, peer sessions, and then they meet with their manager. So this is done weekly, week after week, they do this throughout the program. And so Harvard found out about, you know, kind of what we were doing. We've had a lot of great success in it. My Harvard partner had told me no one else is doing this. Like a lot of people had to kind of stop or pause during the pandemic. And because we started doing blended strategies back in 2015, which it meant just some people were going virtual and all we had to do was say, everyone go virtual. And it's actually, even the playing ground, we'd been able to scale programs quicker and actually build the sizes of our audience. So Harvard had heard about this and said, no one else is doing this. So we presented how it's pretty much, it's very doable for a company to kind of interpret their live programs to virtual. So we've seen a lot of success in that, and actually had business cases that increased revenues, reduced cost, increased customer satisfaction ratings, all kinds of things that are really happening for the business. So there's that component of real business impact. So that's to kind of wrap it up. But so one thing we did with Harvard, that's one way we share and celebrate. We also have podcasts, live leader interviews. We have a CEO and CFO Q&A session. All of this is kind of to share our success and build this momentum internally. And some of that goes external. Our podcasts are now public, so anybody can watch those. We have a show called Ask Assad. It's partnered with marketing. It's not like Learning led that, but it teaches the community, it teaches our employees. And so we consider it part of the learning culture at NOV for sure. So hope
I love that crossing of boundaries between marketing, communications, internal, external, the public, the podcast. So these are great examples of how you've shared your success and then making the business case by perpetuating that cycle. Rhonda, I'm sorry we had to rush you just a little bit. I'm sorry we started a few minutes late. And I want to encourage everyone at this point, because we only have a few minutes left. I haven't seen any questions. Well, here's one question from Jill Hickman. What was the average time reduced for business case presentation from 8 years to
8 weeks?
All right. It's pretty impressive. Thank you. I didn't see any other questions that we weren't able to answer within the session. I would suggest that everyone's contact information is out there on the Whova app. And if you do have questions that we just weren't able to get to, believe me, I knew this was an ambitious undertaking to try to give full time to 5 great stories. So we barely brushed the surface of all of you. And I want to thank the panel so much for sharing your expertise. I really want to encourage everyone to go out there, connect with them, find out more details about all of these great stories that they've told you today. And we know that it's a tough slot to be in, being the only thing between you and happy hour. So we really valued your participation today. You were all great, and some great comments, some great questions. And we wanted to thank all those wizards behind the scene who knew how to mute and unmute people so that we could talk. And we hope that we want to thank Debbie for hosting us and everyone who worked on the fall symposium. Remember to connect with everyone. I'd like to connect with you too. I'm always looking for new wonderful people to share with. And remember, if you want more information, you can buy the TD at Work. This is not a conflict of interest. I don't have to make a statement because I don't get any money. All the money goes to ATD. But there are step-by-step tips, guides, a lot of what these folks talked about today, and some additional stories. So if there's anything else that anyone wants to say out there, it's 5:29. I hope you have a great evening, and thanks so much to everyone. Bye.